Good morning, guys. Today I am in one of the most amazing cities in the world. I am in the city of London. So, welcome to London, guys. You can see Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament in the background, and you can also see the Thames River. And further at my back, you can see the London Eye. So I'm here today in London to visit two unique places, and I'm gonna tell you more about these places as we go along. So stay with me and let's go and go around the city of London. The English monarchy, from the reign of King Richard, King Edward I, and King Edward III, have amassed large quantities of treasures. Several secure places for storing the king's treasures were in regular use during the king's reign. Crowns, gold and silver jewels, and plates and other types of valuables had their own dedicated places of safekeeping. Many of these valuables were held in the Treasury: jewellery, crowns, plate, cups of silver, ceremonial swords, and other precious objects to be given as presents or used on grand occasions. The Pyx Chamber at the Chapter House in Westminster Abbey, the Jewel Tower, and the Tower of London were just some of the places where these royal treasures were securely and safely kept under guard. Today, I am visiting one of these places where the treasures of the kings were used to be kept safely and securely. But no matter how safe and secure these repositories are, some of the treasures they keep end up being stolen. If you are new to my YouTube channel, please don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you will be notified of my next video. Please feel free to share my videos. If you want to find the Pyx Chamber at the Chapter House, all you can do is find the entrance to Westminster Abbey, and then you can find the Westminster Abbey shop, and then just beside it you can find the Dean's Yard. You go inside there and you can have access to the Chapter House and the Pyx Chamber. As you enter Dean's Yard, you just turn left, and that's where you will find the entrance to the Pyx Chamber and the Chapter House. So we're now going into the Chapter House. One of the many places where treasure was stored during Richard III's reign was the so-called Great Treasury. Underneath the chapter house on the east side of the cloister walk of Westminster Abbey. This treasury was in the charge of the treasurer and barons of the exchequer. It was from here that valuables were taken to be used as pledges to the City of London to raise money for the French war early in Richard's reign, and from here that they were delivered to Henry IV's keeper of the jewels in November 1399. The chapter house crypt has served as a royal treasury by the 1260s. It was twice robbed in 1296 and in 1303, whereupon the treasure was removed for a time to the Tower of London. Soon after the second theft, the crypt was converted to make it more secure. Part of the cellar under the monks' dormitory was walled up to create the Pyx Chamber, sometimes known as the Pyx Chapel. 2 skins of thick double doors were added over the existing door to safeguard the entrance. The wood of these doors have been dated by dendrochronology to around 1300. When the king needed to pledge his valuables to raise money for his wars, or when valuables came to the crown's possession through forfeiture, they would pass in and out of the treasury of the exchequer on the north side of Westminster Hall. The exchequer building still stands, although much rebuilt and restored. These transitions were accompanied by a mass of documents recording the movement of crowns and other variables. Goldsmiths were brought in on occasion to make valuables, and some picturesque details emerge of the baskets, chests, and caskets in which items were stored. But how could a theft from Edward I's royal treasury at Westminster Abbey did nothing to help strain relationships between the monks of Westminster Abbey and the royal palace, or the state of the king's finances? On 6 June 1303, Edward ordered an investigation into the matter of the gravest seriousness. Much of the treasure stored in the supposedly impregnable royal treasury at Westminster had been stolen. This treasury was housed either in the Pyx Chamber, which was beside the chapter house in the Westminster Abbey, or in the chapter house crypt. The Pyx Chamber, which dates to the 11th century, is named after the wooden boxes called pyxes, where a sample of the coinage of the realm was held in the advance of the trial of the Pyx, a public demonstration that the coinage of the day was pure. Many valuables were held in the treasury: jewellery, crowns, plate, cups of state, ceremonial swords, and other precious objects to be given as presents or used at grand occasions. Immediately after the shocking theft of much of this treasure, suspicion fell on the abbot and monks, who consequently were all briefly imprisoned in the Tower of London. But King Edward, perhaps reluctant to humiliate a great royal foundation such as Westminster Abbey, eventually released them. Further inquiries identified the culprit as one Richard Pudlicote of Oxfordshire, a gentleman who may have had a grudge against the king, having been imprisoned in Flanders a few years earlier as surety for Edward's growing debts. According to Pudlicote's confession, his knowledge of the abbey and the treasury within came from an earlier small-scale theft. When the loot started showing up in brothels and pawn shops, Budlicote was arrested with 2,200 pounds worth of stolen property in his possession. He was sentenced to death in November 1305, carted from the Tower of London in a wheelbarrow, and hanged on the Abbot's gallows in Tothill Lane. Budlicote's role may have been exaggerated. His confession seems to have been designed to exonerate the monks, who must have been complicit in what looked very like an inside job. But clearly an example needed to be made, although a gruesome legend asserting that the skin was flayed from his body and affixed to the Treasury door to deter other potential thieves. Whoever was to blame, the burglary and the high-profile trials and sentencing that followed was a national scandal. It left a lasting mistrust between the king and Westminster Abbey. And although some of the stolen treasure was eventually recovered, the burglary was also a blow to the king's finances, which he could have done without. When he died in 1307, Edward was probably in debt to the tune of 200,000 pounds, then a massive sum. Many petitions in Parliament heard during the last years of his reign testified to resentment at the king's failure to pay his debts, and much of that money was still owed at the end of his son's reign 20 years later. The boxes that you can see here are called pyxes, where valuables or treasures of the king were kept. That's why it is called the Pyx Chamber. So this is a cope chest made of oak, made way back in 1450. It is one of 6 that is left in the country. It is for holding copes, which are circular capes garments for the clergy to wear. You can see here, guys, how the doors are made. These are the original doors. Made of solid wood. Because the king's treasures were kept in this room, they built double doors to secure the treasures. We are just entering the chapter house. So this is a solid door under lock. The oldest door in Great Britain.